Our next presenter is our own Nic Zapko, and she's going to share some more in depth on what we just gave a little bit of information about. So I'm excited to welcome Nic.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nic Zapko. I'm from Minnesota, and I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm going to be talking to you today about communication to emergency information and maybe some barriers we have to that. I grew up in a family of 6 kids. I had 5 brothers and sisters. My oldest brother was deaf. The rest of the children were hearing until I was born deaf. In the 1970s, there wasn't a lot of knowledge about deafness. American Sign Language was not yet recognized as a language. Here in the US, definitely so. So I really depended on my hearing family members to make sure that I had access to information in the world around me. The television definitely was not captioned at that time. Really, I loved to watch football because it was something that was action-packed and I could understand as long as I knew the rules. I did not know what was going on with the news and the weather, the current events of the world. That was not accessible to me. I thought, as I grew up, that everything was A-okay. As I got older, I recognized that the community looked at me in a way of pity, that I was deaf and that I was not able, that I did not have the ability to do as others. I always looked up to my mother, and my mother always emphasized to me that you are deaf and you are a girl, and neither of those are important. You are a person. You have everything that you need to be successful in what you want to be successful in. Do not let your deafness get in the way. Do not let the fact that you're a female get in the way. And that has always stuck with me. And I have worked hard through my life to be involved in activities. If I wanted to do something, I set it as a goal and I set myself out to do it. I experienced a lot of barriers on the way. And as soon as someone found out that I was deaf, they would say, oh, you need to sit down. You can't do this. And so those barriers I broke through time and time again. I remember when the television was finally captioned and I finally had access to information. Myself and the deaf community, we were hungry for information. We all grew up with a lack of information. And still, caption wasn't 100% the answer. It was a tool. It was English. Our first language is American Sign Language. It's a very visual language. It utilizes space and expression and body language. Captioning does not have all of that included. It's just English words. And it doesn't include the emotions, the tone of the speaker, all of the things that American Sign Language do. It was definitely better than nothing. We struggled as a community to get information out to one another, to have access to information, and maybe find that we didn't have access to all of the places and information that our peers did that could hear. The community came together and worked really hard to figure out how to pull down those barriers to access information. If you recall, in September 11th, 2011, when the trade centers came down, 2001, we, the deaf community, were at a loss. People everywhere looked shocked and scared. They were getting information from the television, from the radio. They were getting word of mouth information. We were absolutely the last group of people to get the information, to find out what happened and get the full story. I just remember feeling shocked, and everybody felt that way. But we, as a deaf community, felt doubly so. We had to depend on family members to give us that information. And really, that information didn't come to us in the present moment when everybody else got it. We definitely lagged behind, as we always did. That communication access barrier is so powerful. Going through that experience, I think, told a lot of people that that barrier was unacceptable, and things got better slowly. When we had earthquakes and fires and hurricanes, different states did set up sign language interpreting on televised media briefings. But really, it's state by state and area by area. And that's still a barrier because we have to work through all of that. We have to discuss and negotiate and get that set up. It shouldn't be a question. It should be something that happens with every media briefing, with every emergency event. We shouldn't have to ask for sign language interpreters to be there and explain and negotiate why we need it. Time went on and COVID-19 arrived. Another catastrophic world global event, a pandemic. And as it's sad, and we had a hard time and we're still struggling through it, for our community, we finally had access to real-time information. And I'll show you that on the next slide. I'd like to take a moment just to describe the slide to those who may not be able to see it clearly. On this slide, you can see the Commissioner Jan Malcolm behind the podium talking about COVID-19 and myself standing to her right, interpreting. That was the very first press conference that we had, and it was the best for our community to receive information about such an important topic at the same time that everybody else did. My 2 hearing children were able to sit on the sofa beside people who were deaf and get the information at the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, when everyone was starved for information and scared and learning about wearing masks and washing hands and keeping things sanitized. Everybody was so overwhelmed, but we were finally included because a live interpreter was there on the screen while everybody else was getting the information. I could turn and discuss it with my family, with young children, make them feel better, and not depend on my partner who could hear to give me the information. I don't want to be the last person in my family to get the information as a person who was deaf. So this was a good positive outcome from the pandemic. On this slide, I'll describe what we see. There are 2 side-by-side pictures. On the left, you again see me interpreting beside the podium, and you can see my interpreting team sitting in front of me. To the right, you can see a diagram of how that communication flow works. You're probably wondering how a deaf interpreter can function as an interpreter that normally would be able to hear. So I stand beside the person presenting. I can't hear them, but I can get the information from my team interpreter who can hear them. They're sitting in front of me and they partner with me to give me the information I need to interpret into ASL for the community. We could talk about COVID, what stage we were in, if the numbers were going up or down. I'll give you a moment to look at the diagram. Here's the next slide. It wasn't always possible for me to be there live in person. So when that couldn't happen, another option for us to provide a sign language interpreter live was to have me in a different room perhaps, or on a virtual feed. They then put me picture in picture on the screen beside the speaker behind the podium. It's a great way to move towards full accessibility with communication for our community. On this slide, it shows a large television with Governor Walz sitting there, giving his presentation, and 2 picture-in-pictures to his right. One is of a sign language interpreter, and one is of a Spanish spoken language interpreter. What a beautiful instance of 3 languages being interpreted, going on at the same time: English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. And we all got the information at the very same time. We didn't have to wait for someone to feed it to us and be lagging behind. A beautiful thing. On this slide, you can see 2 side-by-side monitors. So this is remote interpreting. So as COVID, the numbers got higher and worse, and everybody needed to stay home and in isolation, communication didn't stop for the community. I interpreted from my home with my laptop. I had my team interpreter that I could see on the screen, and we were still able to provide interpreting live beside the speaker, giving the community information. The point of this is, when barriers arise, we have to be innovative. We have to provide equal access to communication no matter what. Here is another picture showing the podium with 2 speakers behind it. I'm standing to the side interpreting. This is one of my favorite funny stories of the pandemic. When I first arrived to the conference room where the media briefings were filmed, all of the reporters and cameramen were at the back of the room. We did some practice sessions and realized that because of my short stature, I was not quite centered on the screen beside the podium. The camera person had to be creative, and he brought in a recycling bin, flipped it on its side beside the podium, and had me stand atop it. So here in this picture, I'm standing on a recycling bin, and I was finally tall enough. And it was challenging because as I moved, it made noise. It squeaked, recycling bins squeak. So they got paper towels and stuffed it so that there wouldn't be an echo and I could sign normally. So how do you like that? So I stood on a recycling bin for a few media briefings until they finally surprised me with what's on the next picture. Here you have a fantastic wooden platform, just like the one the podium's standing on. And I was able to emote and use sign language to its fullest for the deaf community to understand, know that the pandemic was getting better, that numbers were going down, that we were partnering as a community to make things better without the squeaking recycling bin. This is a picture, another view from behind as we were interpreting. I was very proud to be that person standing behind the governor, making sure that the message was getting out into the community at the very same time as everybody else was receiving it. And here I wanted to share with you that I was surprised with a very nice award. They proclaimed that it was Nic Zapko Day, recognizing myself as the only deaf interpreter that had been interpreting there in Minnesota. As Anastasia said, advocacy picked me. I was very proud to be chosen as that advocate. And my mother, I know, is telling me that I've been chosen to be that person to spread the message, and we're not done. We'll keep going and make sure that communication equity continues. Thank you.
Okay. So we are so very proud of Nic Zapko and the role that she plays. We're proud of you, Nic. And thank you so much for flying all the way to Dubai to share your story in the U.S. Pavilion. Thank you.